Bangladesh's growth story has been unmatched.
True.
They've always maintained nearly 6% growth rate, if not more, through these years. Bangladesh has assumed an importance which it never had in the past.
But who decided Mohammad Yunus to be interim government?
There was a general consensus about him. 2014 elections, 2018 elections, and then finally this year, 2004 January elections were never free and fair. In many of these neighborhoods, we've seen corruption at various levels, and it's been easy for China to walk its way through that. So I think between the age of 18 to 28, there's about 28% of Bangladesh's population. A large number of them couldn't vote.
For the ousting, you had given an interview where you had already speculated that Sheikh Hasina has to go. What made you say that?
And Sheikh Hasina was anything but democratic.
Today, we are diving into one of India's most crucial neighborhood, Bangladesh. Our guest is the distinguished Dr Sreeradha Datta, an expert in South Asian affairs who is extremely researched and written about the intricate dynamics between India and its neighboring countries. In this conversation, we'll explore the complexities of India's relationship with Bangladesh amidst the larger picture of South Asia politics, and we'll discuss the anti-India sentiment in the region, Bangladesh's impressive growth story despite political instability, and the rising influence of China as a non-resident power in South Asia. Dr. Datta shares her insights on how India can leverage its soft power, the importance of maintaining strong diplomatic ties with its neighbors, and how Bangladesh's internal political turmoil could impact India's strategic interests. From the tampering of elections in Bangladesh to the concerns of corruption, dictatorship, and Sheikh Hasina's controversial role, this episode unpacks the pressing issues that could shape the future of India-Bangladesh relations. We also touch upon broader themes of regional power dynamics, the necessity for India to act as a responsible elder sibling, and the challenges of balancing influence with reciprocity. If you're interested in understanding the pulse of India's neighborhood, its politics, and its implication for South Asia's future, this is a conversation you wouldn't want to miss. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I just wanted to take a quick moment. We looked at our analytics and noticed that 93% of you who watch our videos regularly aren't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying our content and want us to keep going with more insightful conversation, we'd really appreciate if you could take just a second to subscribe. It might seem like a small action, but it goes a long way in helping us grow and bringing even more amazing content your way. Thanks for your support. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video. But before speaking about Bangladesh, I would like to understand, and I want the audience to understand how deeply you are involved in Bangladesh and where does your interest and passion for Bangladesh come from?
I also don't really know, having worked in 90s.
So you have written multiple books on Bangladesh.
Yes.
You visit Bangladesh a lot.
Very often, yes. Mm-hmm. I adore that country. I think it's fascinating to see what I've seen over the last 25 years that I've been there. My first book on Bangladesh was in probably 99 or 2000, I think, I'm not really sure now, called Bangladesh, the Fragile Democracy. And even today, if we're going to speak about Bangladesh, it's going to be fragility, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just surprised that I'm revisiting that subject over and over again. But yes, I do have some family historical links, like both my grandparents have born, they lived, including my father who studied in a school there. And of course, 47 changed all that. And I think we've everybody moved away during that phase. But there is something about that country which, draws me really, because I don't think officially I've ever had a project really on Bangladesh. It's always been neighborhood, it's always been something. I also looked at Northeast very closely. In fact, I probably cut my teeth on research through the Northeast. And again, you couldn't ignore Bangladesh if you're examining Northeast.
True.
So, and my latest book, which is again formally launched by Bangladesh government in Dhaka this March, was I call it Bangladesh on a New Journey, which is now going beyond the regional identity. So it was always boxed down as a South Asian power or something like that. I think it has a far more, because of the Bay of Bengal gaining prominence because of the Indo-Pacific now becoming the theater for all strategic movement. Bangladesh has assumed an importance which it never had in the past. And it also has helped that Bangladesh's growth story has contributed to that. So, yes.
So the narrative that you put in the book, do you think has changed now after the ousting of the PM Sheikh Hasina?
I wouldn't think so, because while I argue also in this book and elsewhere that, it's important for the government because they bring in stability, they bring in peace, they give you a structure. But I've argued in this book and elsewhere too that it is Bangladeshis really who drive Bangladesh. So the Bangladesh paradox story is really that Bangladesh they were in between phases when they did 7.3% GDP, 7.8, but over the years, and we've seen Bangladesh go through many phases post Mujib 75 assassination, military rule for the longest time ever till 90, and then of course electoral democracy has returned. We are now seeing an interregnum period. We've seen other interregnum period during 2007 and 2008. But despite the political instability, the turbulence, Bangladesh's growth story has been unmatched.
True.
They've always maintained nearly 6% growth rate, if not more, through these years. But at the same time, it is only now, and I wrote a book on Bangladesh's 50 years. And where I examined it a little more in details, and I realized that the shining story was getting a bit edged, and there were rough corners which were not coming out. But that book is all about now somebody has the other day in one of our podcasts also returned to that particular book and mentioned that how I looked at the domestic factors and how the fact that the Sheikh Hasina, I think called it the hybrid democracy in that book at that time. It was very strong authoritarian tendencies were being seen at that point, quite evident. And the way she was, having a very close grip. Also the fact that there was a very typical overarching executive over. So the boundaries between the separation of powers that happens in government organs and bodies were not being visible. So much of that was unfolding. And also last more than a year and a half, I would say Bangladesh's economy was really doing badly. It was going slowly down the rabbit hole. Nobody was taking notice about it. Of course, I'm sure Bangladesh was aware of it. It is still struggling. IMF has given them a loan of 4.9, roughly about that much. I think the third tranche was given to them in July. Of course, they're asking for reforms and restructuring. What I just hear is the interim government has requested for another 3 billion. So clearly, there's much to be, because Bangladesh, again, while have done tremendously well, and I think that's the spirit of Bangladesh, really. Bangladesh is by themselves very hardworking. The entrepreneur skills are very evident. And also, one advantage Bangladesh has always had, that it's not been controlled from the top. It's not been imposed from the top. So the NGO was given free hand. I mean, Professor Yunus, who's now leading the interim government, was the leader of Grameen Bank, right? The microcredit system, where small group could ask for money, and that really transformed. So Grameen Bank, Pro-Shikha.
But who decided Mohammed Yunus to be in the interim government?
I think there was a general consensus about him, irrespective of what political color you belong to.
Between whom?
In Bangladesh itself. The student, this movement that we are talking about, this 5th August incident that happened, it was basically a reform about the quota movement. The student had launched in July. And we saw how the state apparatus was used in terms of, they were unarmed. There was no streak of violence from them, but security forces really used violence much beyond what was required. Tankers were brought out, helicopters were, shedding bombs. So clearly there's a whole disconnect between what the government was doing and what the students demanded. They had put out a 9-point demand actually in between after the killing of Abu Sayyaf, which was, I think, a kind of a trigger moment in Bangladesh's history.
And before we get into the 5th August scenario, I would like to understand from you, who is the real stakeholders of Bangladesh? Like, who are the real people of Bangladesh, like, in terms of decision making? It is the military? Is military an important part of it?
They are important, yes, of course. But it's always been the elected government. Always been the elected government.
Any large businesses?
Oh yes, of course, which is what was evident in the last 5 years. One particular group actually owned 5 of the banks And the fact that I'm talking about the economy tanking, a lot of discredit is actually on the owners of the banks, because they borrowed money liberally from the central bank, and they borrowed from amongst themselves, and the money just disappeared.
Does Bangladesh has any influential billionaires that
Oh, yes.
run the
Oh,
country
yes.
somehow?
Yes, there are.
Would you like to name some?
No, not really.
No.
I mean, it's very well known. They're also, I mean,
Okay.
Bangladesh media has been very brave, I would say, despite the find of, clamping down. There are, in fact, one of our main advisors, who's now been arrested, was one of the main industry holders in Bangladesh. Many groups, Beximco and others, Shah Alam Group, and a whole lot of them which have worked very closely with the government, also were the cause of a huge amount of corruption. Now, Bangladesh was never known to be a corrupt-free country.
Yeah.
But it just went to another level in the last few years. So when Sheikh Hasina, after that interregnum that I mentioned briefly, came back in 2008 December elections, she really had the popular majority and the mandate with her. 2/3 of the country had voted for her.
The third term after. It was the third term, wasn't it?
This was second. First, she was during 1996 to 2001 was the first term as Prime Minister. Then there's BNP which came in, and then again there was a bit of an in-between period. And so 2008 December election, she came with a huge majority. So 2009 January when she took over, basically every Bangladesh wanted to see her there. But subsequently what we saw that she lost that goodwill. Much of it was her government's doing. There were ministers and her student league, were doing outlandish things. So first term was, of course, another point I want to talk about is the fact that elections ever since that election, 2014 elections, 2018 elections, and then finally this year 2004 January elections, were never free and fair.
Wasn't?
Oh, not at all. And so 2014 was one-sided again because the opposition refused to join on the basis of the fact that they said that under Awami League, you can't have a free and fair election being. Now, there has been a reason of that also. There's a historical reason because the divisiveness of polity in Bangladesh is very severe. It's very difficult to understand sitting here if you're not closely watching Bangladeshis, because here we have different spectrum, right? Left, right, center. But when election, we know the election commission, everybody reposes faith on that particular entity in India.
True.
And we've seen how election results, nobody questions. It's always been, yes, whatever the result, people have voted for it. In Bangladesh, it's never so, because always the government has tried to, put a spoke in it or influenced it largely. So they had actually introduced a system called caretaker government in their constitution. Again, on the demand of Awami League, ironically actually. Where the caretaker government, just before election, the government steps down for 3 months. Caretaker government takes over.
Okay.
It's a government which is again consensually decided, a technocrat-led government, who basically assists the election commission to hold free and fair election. That's the only mandate. They stay for 3 months, election commission holds the election, they support it because the other government, the elected government has stepped down, and then it's over. They dispel after that. But when Sheikh Hasina came in 2009, soon after, she of course brought in some changes in the constitution, brought in the secular fabric again, but she also did away with the caretaker government.
Okay.
And wrongfully so. There's a committee that she actually set up to examine whether caretaker government is required or not.
Do we see this kind of system in any other government as well?
We have seen that in some South Africa somewhere, and there's another country I'm forgetting which has.
Seems like a very fair way to
Yes,
hold elections.
Exactly. But she did not really pay heed to what the committee said. The committee actually said the government is not mature enough. For the next 2 terms, the caretaker government should be there. And they said many other things also apart from that, but she just on her own decided that no, the time is over. So when that happened, the opposition, which was BNP in this case, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, led by Khalida Zia, said that we can't fight elections. So 2014, it was a one-sided election, Awami League only in the electoral space. So obviously you have clear mandate. 2018, Awami League again persisted with the same way, but many countries, including USA, played a strong role. to convince the BNP and the other opposition parties that please come back to the electoral space, because what is the point in having these one-sided election? So they actually did. Campaigning was on in the last 1 month last before elections were going to be held. But on the day of the election morning, by 9 o'clock, they had declared results. So clearly, nobody was allowed to go out and vote. Awami League had declared results. So
And the opposition was banned to stand in the elections?
no, 2018 they wanted to join the elections, but they were not able to, because you're supposed to open up the poll booths in the morning at 9 o'clock. But when they went to cast their vote, they said, "Oh, the vote has been cast," and by 9:30 or 10 in the morning, they had decided on the electoral result verdict. Now again, 2004. So opposition did make noises. There was no opposition in the particular terms in the parliament, but BNP, which forms the main opposition, really made some noises. But Sheikh Hasina didn't pay any heed to it. It was business as usual. 2004 January election was again extremely one-sided.
2004, 2024?
2024. 24 January election, where Awami League found a very ingenious way of making very creative to look as if the opposition is there. So while Awami Leaguers were fighting for Awami Leaguers, she took out some Awami Leagues and made them look like the opposition. So new political parties came up overnight, who were then going to come in as the opposition.
Okay.
So again, it was extremely one-sided, opposition said, and there were a huge amount of arrests that happened before that. About 10,000 BNP or opposition leaders were taken in, leaders and people, 10,000, you can imagine the numbers. I was actually there on the 4th January in Dhaka. I wasn't outside Dhaka, it was only in Dhaka that I was out all day long from 9 o'clock till about 6 in the evening. I think the 4:30 was the last time. There were hardly anybody to poll there. Just a few handful, every booth had a few handful, but 40% was certainly not the turnout. Bangladesh, again, a lot of work has been done both by the government as well as by the NGO sector, where one of the largest electoral turnouts in terms of people turnout on the voting has always been very robust. This time we didn't see that.
What was the sentiment with
because,
people then?
Because people realize that you're only going to vote for the Awami again, whether you vote for the government in Awami or the opposition. It's always Awami again. So, my own friends are Awami Leaguers, really. Most of us have friends, lots from the Awami Leaguers. Of course, some very nice friends from BNP too, but my own Awami Leaguer friends didn't go out to vote, many of them. In fact, whoever I called that day hadn't cast their vote because because they were disappointed. And more importantly, whenever I do travel to Bangladesh often, I try and meet as much as possible the students. I give talks at different universities to get their perspective. And every time, whether it was 14, 18 or 24, first time voters were very disappointed, right? And we keep talking about the youth dividend. So I think between the age of 18 to 28, there's about 28% of Bangladesh's population. A large number of them couldn't vote. Not when they were 18 for the first time in 14, or when they were 18 in 2018, or even now. So there was a generation of students who could never vote because there was no scope. So clearly there was a lot of disappointment and anger and resentment going against this particular government, so which we saw a spillover that happened, and finally the event of 5th August.
It sounds like a dictatorship, ma'am.
Oh yes, it is. It was.
Going next, before that, I would like to speak about just before the ousting, you had given an interview where you had already speculated that Sheikh Hasina has to go. How did you come to that conclusion, and what made you, because you've been analyzing a lot of different situations over the years, so what made you say that?
The problem started from 1st July when the students, again, when this quota system was, let me just very briefly touch on the quota system. In 72, the quota for the liberation war soldiers, families were brought in. Only that time soldiers, it was not family. It was, I think, outlandish numbers, 80% or something.
Yeah, 80%.
Yeah, and I think that time the soldiers were not even 2% of the population, less than that. So obviously there was a huge...
Why was this the case then?
You know how they are. I mean, they are iconic people, right?
Okay.
Liberation of Bangladesh, so people. But over the years, we've seen the quota becoming
Going down.
30%, 56%, and all over quota, and liberation quota. But they've always been a kind of a discourse where students have always said that and jobs are a problem these days, right?
Yeah.
Economies, even when they're doing well, unemployment has been high. I mean, look at India. So similarly for Bangladesh. So, and then you have quotas. And again, what has happened is, even through quotas, you're not able to fill those jobs. So you often felt the government in power, which is Awami League, was using those to fill in with their own people. Just to, how, as I said, the system is not really very transparent, accountable.
Was that the case though?
That was, of course, a case, certainly. But over the years, we've seen students on and off rally against, have protest movement. So 2018, Sheikh Hasina said that let's do away with this quota for the liberation war families. From soldiers, it had changed to families subsequently. So they did away with that. But it was only a year and a half ago actually, six family members, six members from different six families brought in a writ petition to the High Court wanting to reintroduce the quota system. And it was only early this year in June, that the High Court again went back and brought in the 30% quota. This happened when the students were there was Eid holiday soon after in Bangladesh, and of course this was summer vacation. So when the students came back to their dormitories and hostels in July, they started a peaceful protest. It always started with Dhaka University. That's a bastion of student politics. All universities have a very strong student political wing. But it was very, very silent, quiet protest that the students were doing. There was a trigger that happened when I think 16th July, Sheikh Hasina was returned from a visit to Beijing. And on her, when the press meet at the airport itself, possibly, they asked her, amongst other questions, they also asked her about that, what are you going to do with these agitating and protesting students? And she kind of very angrily said that, why will I not keep jobs safe for liberation war families? Should I then open it out for Razakars? Now, Razakar, while in Urdu probably means followers, in Bangladesh it has a very pejorative connotation, which essentially means those people who had supported the Pakistan during the liberation war and who didn't support East Pakistan.
Jamaat Islami?
Also.
Okay.
And also we've seen how, war crime trials were initiated by Sheikh Hasina, where many of these people, which included Razakars and others, and they're known as collaborators, basically, anti-liberation elements.
Who were against the liberation.
So when this word was used against them, a bit of lost in translation really, but the students really were very aggrieved. So there's some very fascinating poetry and songs that came about, and students said that, no, we are all Razakars. Is that how you see us? But soon after, the next day itself, the General Secretary of Awami League, who's also a Minister for Road and Transport and Bridges, he said that, this problem can be easily solved by my Chhatra League boys. They can fix the problem.
Okay.
That, two back-to-back such negative impression really was the trigger. And then you saw a huge call when students literally, you could see the hordes of students walking out. And campuses all across, not only Dhaka, campuses all across the country. And then on 17th July, there's one very particular image, couple of images and a video also, in Rangpur, in a district of Bangladesh, Abu Sahib. Again, a kind of a typical milestone, I would say, who depicts what Bangladesh is all about. He's probably the 8th or the 7th child in the family, the first one who went to college, who went to university. He was having a conversation with the security personnel, but he was shot down in open blank fire. That was, I think, the historical moment and trigger. And this interview happened, that you mentioned just now, a day after that. Yes. So while there was internet ban at that point of time imposed by the government, so we really didn't have much of information. But I remember that morning, and I think I said that in the interview, that I heard about 145 deaths already that morning. And so we didn't really have access to information. But my gut feeling was that once an unarmed student is brought down like that, and subsequent number of deaths that happened over a matter of 24 or 36 hours, it's very difficult to stay in power. I mean, nobody will allow you. You've got blood on your hands. And on a particular issue, which was something that I said, I watched very closely what was happening from 1st July. There were protests, there were songs, there were and a lot of the old liberation war songs are being recreated. Families of these children and their family and other supporters were out on the streets. But the way the government, put in the security forces to deal with it was completely unacceptable. And for me, little that I understand of Bangladesh, I thought that after this is, it's not acceptable anymore that a prime minister or a leader of a government stays after this particular incident. So I mean, I know I was very too early for this, but my reading was that it's not acceptable anymore.
By what you said, I'm understanding that it is an internal situation that led to Sheikh Hasina being ousting, but there's a lot of speculations that US had a massive role in it, so did Pakistan, so did China. Do you want to burst that bubble for the audience, ma'am, please?
I just want to ask that how does anybody gain by removing Sheikh Hasina? Sheikh Hasina was working very well with China. I mean, the last visit wasn't all that great, but I think there was a bit of issue over the Teesta river management project. That was probably a bit of an issue. But if you look at the last couple of years, ever since Sheikh Hasina has been there, she's worked very closely with India,
Chinese, yeah.
with China, with India. Strong development partnership with both. China, even before that, was a strong defense partnership with Bangladesh, enjoyed it, continues to enjoy that position. Much of the large projects that we see successfully being done in Bangladesh has a Chinese contribution there. So there was no question that China would want to remove her.
But when it comes to Pakistan, they were afraid that Bangladesh is getting closer to India, which was the case. And again, there's a scenario of the US as well, that they wanted to buy some islands near Bangladesh. That
let me talk about Pakistan briefly. Can Pakistan manage itself? How will it ever do anything with Bangladesh, really? I mean, I don't think that's even a question here. I mean, they've, of course, as I said, I think in somewhere I wrote about it also, that they gave support to the student movement in some statement or the other. So be it.
they did.
They did. They just said that
they sent their Bangladeshis.
No. It was like a verbal support that to the student movement. This was before Sheikh Hasina left. This is that we support in what you're doing.
But in China, coming back to China, the university, there was a lot of Bangladeshi students who study in China, and they were sent back for the protest. Is that true?
I don't know that. I mean, if that's a factual statement, possibly they were. I don't know that, but I don't think. I mean, I'm just saying that I don't see how China would gain by changing status quo, because they were working very well with Sheikh Hasina, and there are very strong people within Awami League who work or will want to work with China closely always. So it wasn't as if that BNP or any other power works with China closely, but Awami League doesn't. Sheikh Hasina and all her members work very close with
China's
China.
main focus is India. So if removing Sheikh Hasina but gives us a problem, of course China would benefit.
Well, that might be the argument, but you really feel, and anybody who understands those Bengalis in Bangladesh, it's impossible. And I always say that if anybody has the capacity and wherewithal to actually manage students across the country nationwide, my hat's off to them. And I don't think any power can do that. Not a power which is there. It was an impulsive, from the ground, indigenous movement. I have absolutely no doubt about that. Now, in that movement, every element has joined. So many have questioned Islam, Jamaats and BNP, but Jamaat, BNP are part of the Bangladesh polity. So Islamic elements are part of the Bangladesh polity. So they, of course, joined. Every element, every shade of population joined that movement. It was students, yes, but once the death started, and the shooting that I said was not only student shooting, there were bystanders, onlookers who were being killed in that pathetic scenario that was unfolding. So everybody from all walks of life were joining in this particular, and it's not the first time that Bangladesh has seen a civil society turn out on the roads. It's not the first time, it will not be the last time also. So there were many other elements there. And let's come back to the US. And I'm really not sure US really sitting so far away with the election taking, priority in their own domestic space now. Would they have so much of time for Bangladesh? Yes, they've always harped on the democratic factor, which is true. But they've done that always. It's not the first time. And Sheikh Hasina was anything but democratic. not only from electoral space. I mean, as I said, it was electoral. I mean, periodic elections have taken place, but these elections were anything but democratic, firstly. And again, if you look at the fact that Bangladesh in 2023 or 22, they came out with a Indo-Pacific outlook, which is something really that the US wants them to do. So, I mean, there was everything that US wants them to do was happening, except for the fact that US went down very strongly on sanctions on RAB, which is a particular force that they had on the very extrajudicial killings and those kind of things. Again, there are many more now. We are aware of those facts now. The St. Martin's Island.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a student doing my master's, that was first time, so 30 plus years ago, that this controversy was there. I haven't heard anything about this. I think President Biden went on record to say that he had not sent in a request like this. I've also asked my friends in Bangladesh, I would love to see the file where this request was about, US wanting that particular space for their own defense, presence. But I don't think that's really a reason to remove Sheikh Hasina. And firstly, I would like to call a bluff on that. I don't think US wanted that space. And even if they did want, removing her was no guarantee to getting that. Because I don't think anybody had given them assurance. And I know it's a story which has been historically present, but I don't see any future or current recurrence of that particular St. Martin's or any other request. So every country, every nation will have some differences or the other with other. But I don't think that US really has the capacity to do the kind of, yes, once that movement started, everybody probably jumped in. As you're saying that China probably sent in students. I don't know. Maybe they did. But everybody then wants to leverage a bit of it, right? But it was certainly an organic movement that happened because the students wanted that. You can't, orchestrate that. Yes, there were Islamist elements there, and which I think right now there's a clear understanding that, there were 6 student leaders who's kind of taken ownership of the movement. It is being said that 3 of them have very close links with Islamic political parties. So be it. Yes, they do, but they're also part of Bangladesh, right? So we can't ignore that particular aspect. So right now, as we see it, then the interim government took over, which everybody now is, often bringing it, and I think Indian media is also playing on that many of these elements, they're all from several expertise area, have a BNP element. But yes, because of the anger, resentment, which is very clear against Awami Leaguers, they clearly could not be part of the interim government, because nobody who took accept an interim government which had Awami Leaguers. So, and again, Bangladesh is very, as I said, divisively divided. Anybody, doesn't matter whether you're what profession you are, whether you're a chartered accountant, engineer, whatever you are, you always have some color, whether you're the blue or the white color of all. So clearly there are some people, whether it's an environment expert or you're a civil society activist, whatever it is, you seem to be having a particular allegiance or loyalty towards one particular party. So that may be the case in interim, but I think they are extremely capable people, extremely people that every Bangladesh looks up to, and there's no question about the fact that not only the students, all of Bangladesh wanted Professor Yunus to come in there as an interim chief.
Okay. Why is the situation in Bangladesh so critical for India? Because we've seen that it is an important part of our geopolitics as well to have a stable government in Bangladesh. What is the learning from this situation for us, and how should what is the way ahead?
So India has been widely criticized about the fact that we only worked with Awami League. Now, Awami League was in government, so we worked with them. Now, historically again, we have always worked very well with Awami League, irrespective of who's sitting in Delhi, UPA government, NDA government, any government, because of a historical links with Mujibur Rehman and the Awami Leaguers, and also because we think they are the only secular political party there, though I question that actually. But at the same time, it's a political party that we were comfortable with. And Sheikh Hasina, as you know, during the time when Mujibur Rehman was assassinated, his entire family was gunned down. She and Rehana escaped because they were in Germany at that time. So they were not able to go back to. Circumstances in Bangladesh were very difficult under the military leader Ziaur Rehman that time. So she wasn't able to enter her own country for a few years. So she stayed here in 6 years.
That was 1975.
75, post-75, yeah. So for the first 5-6 years, she was actually here post the assassination. So clearly there's a kind of a historical legacy of this relationship, right? But at the same time, we've also seen the worst bilateral phase that India has faced with Bangladesh was during 2001 and 2006, when there was a BNP-led government where Khalida Zia was the prime minister. Everything we tried, nothing worked. And we've had the worst security situation that time. Terror blast, insurgent camps, all kinds of anything that you could think of was happening, So this was very difficult time. So while that is also true, at the same time, I think the reason that India is being widely criticized by Bangladesh and elsewhere is not so much that everybody understands why India backs Sheikh Hasina and the fact that she's in India right now.
Yeah.
But the fact that India kept quiet when Sheikh Hasina was becoming authoritarian was, there was no rule of law in the country. Very draconian laws. The media, if you didn't speak her language, you were completely made marginal, punished. And I've seen how some of my own friends have suffered at the hand of this government. And friends who are pro the government, pro Awami League, but just that they had a voice to say against her own particular ways. And she was very sharp on that, very critical, very harsh, I would say. So I think the fact that India was complicit and quiet, and it worked for us. Sheikh Hasina's government and India government worked very well, whether it was Manmohan Singh government or Prime Minister Modi's government. So we obviously kept quiet, and I think that has
because she had a soft corner in her heart against against Pakistan and soft for us, right?
Oh, she's very anti-Pakistan. She makes no bones about that. And she's very pro-India, of course. But again, that's a historical legacy, right? And as I said, but while she did everything correctly with us, but the fact that she didn't do anything correct inside. And in Bangladesh was facing the worst unemployment, the worst food inflation, whole lot of other distress that everybody was going through. And she wasn't paying attention.
The power got to her head, and that's what happens when you are too much about yourself, you fall at the end of the day. And that's what happened here as well.
Shivam, I actually have a theory that no leaders should stay beyond 2 terms.
Is it?
Yeah, it just goes. I mean, there's a reason why some countries have this as part of their constitutional, requirement. I think leaders lose their sense of propriety. They probably think that, they have it all. But clearly Sheikh Hasina was losing ground touch. She didn't know what was happening on the ground, what was the feeling from the students, everybody else.
She could have saved the situation if she would have simply apologized for the situation.
Funny you say that. This particular interview that I did on the 17th July or maybe 18th, where I said that Sheikh Hasina, I just said that she has blood on her hands, she has to go. I also said that because I think, the moderator was asking me that, what do you think the Prime Minister should do now? And I said, what can Bangladesh do now? I said the only one who can actually make a difference in this difficult time is Sheikh Hasina herself. She just has to come out and say, I'm sorry guys. I mean, okay, whatever has happened, mistake, whatever it is, forgive me and let's talk. And that's the only thing that's possible that can turn things around, that she has dialogue with not only the students but the entire, and civil society was not out so much on the 17th day. But she didn't do that. And it's funny that you say this, but I really believe that she could have turned things around because everybody did look up to her. It's a fact that, when she was voted, as I mentioned, things didn't go too well in the last 5 years specifically. But again, Prime Minister is the only one who could have, put balm on those wounds. But she preferred not to. She chose not to.
Ma'am, you mentioned Sheikh Mujibur Rehman as well, the father of the nation in Bangladesh. Why has he been so disrespected since the ousting of Sheikh Hasina?
It's so strange. I know. I mean, it's shocking actually, right? When we watch these images, his house, his museum, everything being burned down, brought down. But I really don't know, and I think nobody has answers for this except for to say that maybe it's a pressure cooker moment, that the huge anger, the resentment, the fears that they had all just burst like that. And I think many of the interim government leaders, as well as student leaders, of course, have constantly said that this is again unacceptable, and this is not the reason that we fought this. The movement was not to do this. So clearly there are some elements there who want to change the narrative, and but again I would say this is not Bangladesh, majority of Bangladesh do not, and I put my head out there, while it looks a bit awry at this time, that majority of Bangladeshis do not support these, hooliganism and completely very, very violent, ways of life. And I think for some odd reason, they've come to believe that the only way to change is through violence. I think that has to be very clearly addressed.
But the change with the students was that their sentiment was that they want to make a very intellectual state now.
Exactly.
But that's not been showcased until now. It's been showcased the opposite, like you said, hooliganism. Bangladesh is also disregarding the national anthem right now, which they feel has been imposed by India. Sonar Bangla which was written by
Tagore, who's a national iconic, right? He's an icon for us, he's an icon for them. And I'm really surprised about this controversy, but again, there have always been some elements. I mean, do not ignore the Indian media and the India hyperbole about Bangladesh also, please. So similarly, I think Bangladesh is facing that particular thing. But again, if you remember this, anthem, which is a song really written during the Bongo Bongo Andolan, which was the unification of Bengal at that point of time. It was not meant to be written it was not written by Tagore as anybody's national anthem. It was adopted in 72. By Bangladesh themselves. India had no hand to play. I mean, Tagore is for them, continues to be. We share many poets like Tagore, like Nazrul Islam, who are common to both of us. So if they want to move away from that, it's their choice. It's up to them. I don't think India has anything to do with it.
I know we are running short of time, but I've got two major conversations I want to bring in. The first one is that first I would like for you to put some light on why Pakistan split before, why was the liberation of Bangladesh needed at that point of time, and how the sentiment of Bangladeshis is going towards Pakistan now again. I feel so. If you want to clarify that for me, ma'am.
Very quickly, it's a long history and a very painful history, but just summarize in 2 minutes, we're running short. Of course, on the cultural issues, I mean, the two-nation theory was bust, right? That it was just not, I mean, while religious cohesion and identity was important, but the fact that Urdu was made the national language, they fought for it, they introduced Bengali also. So that particular day in February is still celebrated very robustly in Bangladesh, the language day, when they were able to reintroduce Bengali in East Pakistan as also another national language. And then, of course, West Pakistan extractive policies. The main natural resources was with East Pakistan.
Not the economy, you're saying?
Economy, yeah. Okay, very extractive economy.
Because East Pakistan was doing good economically.
That's right, because it had access to, like jute, rice, many other natural resources that West Pakistan actually took away from East Pakistan and, made money on that, didn't give that amount which is required. Also, I think the last critical trigger was when in the national elections, Awami League under Sheikh Mujibur, East Pakistan Awami League under Sheikh Mujibur Rehman won majority of seats and he was not made the Prime Minister. They dilly-dallied on some pretext or the other. And they kept changing the, discourse. So I think that was the time when finally, and even till the last, I think, 3rd March, Ramna's speech that Sheikh Mujibur Rehman actually talks about, where he finally talks about, wanting a different independent state. That was really the trigger, because he realized that he'll never get, while being voted by the people, you are still not being accepted as the majoritarian leader. So how do you stay together? So that was, I think, the final. Right now, as I mentioned briefly, that Sheikh Hasina has been very anti-Pakistan because of the history again. Yes, right now we hear some rumors about it, but about how Pakistan. But, at the same time, they were together at some point of time, like for a few years, right, from 47 to 71. And there is a common religious identity. And then, so to completely ignore that and say we don't recognize Pakistan, I think is also taking it to another level. So there are some elements, there always were many Bengalis who actually moved out from West Pakistan into East Pakistan and became part of Bangladesh. But often there are family linkages which still exist, and there is a kind of so to completely do away that we don't exist or we don't, that doesn't make sense. So might now we see a bit of Indian media, and I'll make this particular thing about how Jinnah's birthday has been celebrated the first time in the history of Bangladesh. Yes, so be it. But at that point of time, Jinnah was the one who, brought them together, East Pakistan, West Pakistan. But I don't think one particular, and whatever pictures I saw, I didn't think it was worth even taking so much of notice of. I don't think there were even 100 people in that room. So why are we making such a big deal about it?
No,
There will always be some elements in every country who has some choices. So be it. I don't see why it should bother anybody really.
The linkages have been increased since the interim government of Yunus have come in picture. They have lifted the ban on Jamaat Islami. They have recently did a deal of a lot of ammunition from Pakistan as well.
I didn't understand this. I honestly didn't go into it very strongly. But, as I mentioned, China and Bangladesh have very strong defense partners. So it may be possible that in some particular case, some components, something wasn't available with China. So maybe Pakistan was told to supply. I don't know. So I haven't gone into the details. But again, I think we are making too much out of a molehill. It's really not anything so important. And we've always heard about how the military linkages are very strong. But at the same time, I think our linkages with the military establishment is also very strong. So I don't think that Pakistan, I know there's a particular section in India who wants to completely whip that up. But I don't think that's it's not even, I would say, in competition at all. It's there. There's a presence. There's a certain section of the society, especially. I mean, you talked about Jamaat. Jamaat was delegitimized as a political party because on their constitution of their own political party, it was not as per the Bangladesh constitution. Like Bangladesh constitution, as I mentioned, was secular, so they were not. So which is why they were debarred. High Court ruled. So they were, and now they've been brought out. But again, Jamaat is also part of Bangladesh polity. Leaders, and again, I would say the Jamaat of the early years is a different Jamaat now. So I think we are reading too much into it, and I think while there was one particular space during Sheikh Hasina's time that many of the other political voices were not given space. Why I see an outburst just now. But I'm very confident, and as I said, I have tremendous faith in Bangladeshis that they will return to become a robust, secular, or a strong polity. I mean, again, very briefly, let me just touch upon the word that while secular notion was introduced to Bangladesh constitution, but in all sincerity, I've never understood whether all of Bangladesh understand what secular means. They're just being good Muslims, and I don't see any wrong or anything, any amiss about that. Just because they're good Muslims doesn't mean anything anti, really. And that's how I see Bangladesh. And I think I'm very upbeat about the fact that interim government will, he's put in 6 committees now, and hopefully, reforms will be kicked in soon than later. And Bangladesh will return to be a electoral democracy very soon. I'm confident. It may take a year or two once reforms are in place. Some specific structures need to be in place, which we've not seen Bangladesh have. So I'm positive about Bangladesh. Right now, it is a part of concern. There are some elements which we are, is giving some problems, but security apparatus also hasn't kicked in. The police is away. That because police was very closely politically aligned, which is now we are trying to bring in that, some reforms can't have an open night. So Bangladesh, I think, is on the job. Some of the police stations, thanas, are functioning again. It's a work in progress, so we can't expect overnight. But again, as I mentioned, the violence is not something that Bangladesh wants. I don't think the interim government can or is able to address the problem, which is countrywide. But hopefully, yes.
Do you think China can use Bangladesh in putting pressure on India? Because there's an issue in Manipur at the moment, in northeast of India, there's an issue, and there's a small corridor that is the Siliguri corridor that connects, that is a very 20-kilometer corridor that connects India to northeast, and Bangladesh and Nepal is in between. It is also so what do you think, is this critical for us to improve upon in the following years?
Siliguri corridor, the chicken's neck as we call it, it is a very important critical corridor, but I think our security establishment is far than capable of maintaining its security. Yes, in the past we've seen China has, and other countries, Pakistan has used many of these elements against India, but I mean that India and this India is different now. I mean the 2001 India, 2002 India is not the 2024 India, and India, as you know, will not brook any such interference from anybody else. And I don't think China is in a position to influence Bangladesh really. I mean, we are again, I think, giving them too much of importance really. Bangladesh, if you understand, see them a little way, very difficult to, as I said, to manage. And, if they think it's what they decide for themselves, yes. But you can't maneuver them and manipulate them. That's the last thing you can do to a Bangladeshi.
Okay.
But at the same time, I do think while there are anti-Indian elements, as very pronounced just now, but Bangladesh and Indian partnership is something which is always going to live. They are going through a dull moment at this point of time. But today I saw a statement where I think the BNP General Secretary met with our High Commissioner there. And High Commissioner has said that we are going to work together. Of course we are going to work together. I mean, there is no question about that. It's a bit of a critical phase. But I think the partnership is something very robust, very strong. And more importantly, it has brought dividends to both sides of the people. And every Bangladeshi is in some form or the other touched by Indian, whether it's medical tourism, whether it's shopping, whether it's the language, whether it's poetry, whether it's scholarships. So it's not something that they're going to do away with. And for us, Bangladesh, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that many of our foreign policies are impinged on Bangladesh's support. And we have certainly made no two bones about that. And I think Prime Minister has always, said so openly and always has requested from Bangladesh's, partnership, which I think will always be forthcoming for India.
Ma'am, you're someone who actively reads, writes about Bangladesh, who you visit Bangladesh a lot, you are passionate about Bangladeshis as well. I've noticed that in our conversation. And you would always give a right perspective, not just for India, but for Bangladeshis, for them as well. If you were to become the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, what is the framework that you would do? What were the changes that you would, and bring them back on the rising star that they were in economically and otherwise as well?
I think first and foremost, try and address the corruption. I mean, it's very easy to say that, very difficult because it starts from the ground. So and goes up right to the sky. So that's something that you need to address. Have a stable economic framework and structure in place, which wasn't there. It was doing very well, but without an architecture, I would think. So, those kind of, and also I think what we see in India, the division of power of the organs of the government, that has to, the judiciary, everything, legislature has to be all have to have their own autonomy. The Election Commission, as I mentioned in India, is somebody that we all admire and we all look up to and we all repose faith in. Bangladeshis have to have institutions. Again, every country has their own political choices, whatever that case may be, but don't dilute your institutions and your education systems and all that by wrong choices. And I think those are some of the first, and of course many other, small issues. But again, as I said, Bangladesh are an inspiring lot, and they would probably work harder than anybody to get their country back on tracks. And we've seen that time and again when Bangladesh has gone off trail. It's a civil society who comes in very strongly and ensures that Bangladesh is back on track. Again, without political leadership, what I would actually like to, see in Bangladesh, more political parties. Right now, it's two political parties really that the fight is between, and both are very based on family hierarchies. Both BNP and Awami League, excuse me. So right now, if I could actually, with a magic wand, bring in more political parties to ensure a level playing field.
Students were wanting to make a political party as well.
Yes, but it's so difficult. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, but I do hope not only students, but different cross sections from, often in South Asia, it also has got a bad label, right? The corrupt people will go to it or something like that. But I do believe that, smart, young, decisive students, youth should be front face of political parties. I really would wish to see many more political parties come up. So, I mean, there are plenty of political parties, but I guess all of them in some coalition or the other, either with Awami League or with BNP, but strong independent political parties who have another idea for Bangladesh. I would love to see that. Yes.
Nice. I hope the policy makers are listening to you and they probably indulge in the policies that you've made them realize. I have learned a lot about Bangladesh today, ma'am. But before I go, I would like to ask you a couple of personal questions. One is, what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self? Someone who is on a similar line as you, who is trying to be like you.
do something that engages you, keeps your interest level high, because we all have to earn a life, right? Earn a living. So careers are important. For me, I think I sacrificed monetizing, or a lot of my friends in the corporate world, other world, really have in that sense done so much monetarily better. But I believe I have a job that I'm so happy to go back to every morning. So I have changed a bit in my career, from being part of the defense research think tanks to then now in the university space, but largely all research based jobs in academia, really, which has been so rewarding. I love it. I love reading, I love writing, and I think I've enjoyed every moment of it. So while I may not be driving the most flashiest of cars like my corporate friends are, but at the same time, at a point my husband always makes this, that she gets up with a smile on her face. I think I love what I do.
Do what you love is what you're saying.
Yes, and I think what I would also say that do it sincerely. I mean, there are no shortcuts to anything in life. I mean, I don't know what successes are. I mean, I don't know how you define in your young terms, really. But I think the satisfaction of doing a job well done is something that nothing can match it. So, I mean, whatever I do, I try and do as much as I can. And I know there are plenty of times when I'm not able to give it time, some aspects of my, job demands or whatever.
Lovely.
But be honest to yourself. I think as long as you can go to sleep with a clear conscience, nothing else is more important.
Lovely, ma'am. While I will be attaching your books on the description, all your latest books for readers to go through. Since this podcast is called Diary of a Publisher, I make sure to ask my guest a question based on a book. So is there any particular book that you wish you would have read earlier in life that has shaped your understanding of life and maybe geopolitics or whatever you are into? Any book that you wish you would have read earlier?
My books that really influenced me was really, really young. I was a bookworm, I still am. You have to come home to see the thousands of books that I have. Ayn Rand was one author I read. Every book.
Any particular book?
Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged. Even the third one. I mean, everything that... I read a lot of Shashi Tharoor, even if it's politically incorrect to say that, but I love his language.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to learn. Of course, given my workspace, I read a lot of contemporary writing. So I'm fascinated by memoirs. So whether it's Kissinger's or it's Barack Obama's, Jagat Mehta's, one of our first foreign secretaries, I think. Fabulous. I mean, I read everybody's. I mean, any memoir kind of autobiography that comes out, that's fascinating for me. And a lot of these days, and thankfully, many of our retired diplomats are writing books, and they're fabulous. And I think they contribute so strongly to our understanding. And some fascinating, snippets, stories, which actually tell you the little thing on the ground, which you don't read, in newspapers, right? So these, I think, for me, autobiographies and memoirs, and also many of these foreign retired across, not only in India but across. I think their books contribute very strongly to our body of literature, in the line that I am in. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Books has been an important part of you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your beautiful perspective, ma'am. I've taken more than the time that you allotted, but has been really insightful for me and inspiring as well, and I'm sure it's been for the audience as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We at TOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better, our production quality is going to get even better, and hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.